couple of things I wanted to talk about. So I figured I'd start with music. Something in the news recently that a lot of you guys may have noticed is that Tool is actually coming out with a new album soon. And I don't know how many Tool fans I have in my audience, but I am a massive Tool fan. I'm not an elitist, so I don't think that you have to be smart to listen to Tool, or anybody that doesn't listen to it is stupid or something like that. I hear a lot of that. It's not like that. I just really like Tool a lot. It's one of my favorite bands. So I'm pretty excited about that because it's been 10 years or over 10 years since they released an album. Their last album release was called 10,000 Days, and it was in 2006. So 12 years ago, 13 years ago, basically. So we got word that the singer, Maynard James Keenan, he tweeted that he was going to be releasing the new album this year. It's pretty exciting. I was looking up tour dates and everything. I'm definitely planning on going to a concert. They've got some going on in, they've got some concerts going on in Florida, in North Carolina, and Illinois in May. With some pretty interesting bands, too. They've got Incubus, Korn, System of a Down. Some other bands will be playing with them in various locations. So I'm pretty excited about that. Hoping I get to go to a concert, because honestly, this may be their last album. This may be their last tour. Maynard is in his 50s now, the singer. So who knows? But yeah, a lot of people wonder, like, how did I get into Tool, having been a Jehovah's Witness growing up? This band is not super great for Jehovah's Witnesses. I don't know of any other Jehovah's Witness that was like, that grew up with me, like from my Kingdom Hall, that listened to Tool. Like, none of them did. Or A Perfect Circle, or Pussifer, or any of the other bands that Maynard sings for. They wouldn't even listen to, like, Incubus because of the name. Just because of the name. That is just over the top. That is such a vanilla band. Like, they're so chill and cool, and they almost never swear in their music. They're not hard rock. They're not heavy metal. They're just, I don't know. That band is so chill, and Jehovah's Witnesses won't listen to them. Or at least my hall wouldn't, because of the name, Incubus. So, anyways, my brother listened to Tool, actually. When I was, I think, 12 or somewhere in there, he was 18, and he was getting married. And his wife at the time, or fiance or whatever, she listened to Tool. And she introduced me to their album. I don't know how to pronounce it. I shouldn't even try, but I'm going to anyways. I think it's called Anima. I actually grew up calling it Anima, but anyway, it's kind of confusing to switch now. But yeah, I grew up listening to that album, and eventually I listened to Lateralis, and then I listened to 10,000 Days. And it's got just a really deep meaning to all of the songs. They all have such a deep meaning behind them. I just love the band, so that's pretty exciting news to me. But yeah, I listened to a lot of Tool, and now that album, Anima, I guess, is how you pronounce it. It's pretty heavy. It's one of their heavier albums. I think the only heavier album that they have is called Undertow, and it was right before Anima. And, you know, Anima was kind of the first one I listened to, so I only listened to a couple songs from Undertow. Not a huge fan of that album, really. But after listening to that, I got into some heavier stuff. I listened to a lot of Metallica and Pantera, and all of this was, of course, without my parents' knowledge. They were not supposed to know that I was listening to this stuff. They got pretty persnickety about it, but honestly, I had a computer. What were they going to do? They tried taking the computer away, but it's just not easy to do with a teenager. It's hard to enforce, honestly. I also listened to some Godsmack and things like that, surprisingly. It's kind of a little bit of a rebellious teenager at one point, but anyways, yeah, big fan of Metallica, big fan of Pantera, big fan of Megadeth. Really liked Megadeth back in the day. Some of you may actually know that the singer of Megadeth went from being the guitarist for Metallica, which, by the way, he's a killer guitarist. Dave Mustaine is his name. So he ended up getting fired or quitting Metallica or something, starting the band Megadeth. And it turns out he's an ex-Jehovah's Witness, too. Dave Mustaine is. Over time, I think in the 2000s, his music started really going downhill, in my opinion. And as he became more Christian, he got really, really super Christian. Like non-Jehovah's Witness. I don't even know what he was, Baptist or something. But, he incorporated Jesus into his music and everything. It really sucks, man. Really sucks that happened to the music, because it was just really fantastic. Listen to a lot of Black Sabbath, too, and things like that. But my parents definitely warned against Black Sabbath, which is funny because they both listened to Black Sabbath in the 60s, being hippies. My dad was a big fan of Black Sabbath, but they warned, my mom especially, she warned against it. She said it was music from Satan and everything else. My dad didn't really enforce the no Black Sabbath rule, but he did enforce a lot of other rules about music. Anyway, music has always played a really big part in my life because, no matter what, I've always had music there. It's always been there. And I've always found a way to listen to the music that I liked. No matter what, I always found a way. No matter how forbidden it was, I always found a way to listen to it. So it did play a big part in my life, for sure. The video I have here is Scientology's indoctrination video, basically. So when I play the video, you guys on Discord are not going to be able to hear it unless you're watching the live stream. So, to give you a little background on this video, it's Tom Cruise. And I just about guarantee I'm going to get a copyright strike for it because I have music playing in the background. It's fine. I'll figure it out. But it'll be worth it to hear the guy talk. I thought about it before actually starting the podcast, because I had the option of just writing down what he says and then reading it to you guys so you can get a feel for what he was saying. And that would avoid the copyright strike problem. But sometimes I feel like it's necessary to watch the video, to hear the inflections in his voice, to look at his eyes and how they light up when he says certain things. It's important to get the full effect from it. Copyright strike or not, sometimes I feel like it's necessary to watch the video in its entirety. Just like the Heaven's Gate video that I played a few Sundays ago. I got hit with the Content ID system on the Heaven's Gate one, but it was worth it to see how he talks to his audience. At this point, I played a Scientology indoctrination video with Tom Cruise, but the moment it went live, the live stream was shut down. So I'm going to have to cover it on my main channel. For now, we'll continue on with the podcast without the Scientology video, but watch out for it on my main channel. That is YouTube's Content ID system catching things. They are really, really good with their Content ID system, unfortunately. But I will do that on my main channel now that I know that, they're ready to catch things so quickly. That's really disappointing. I really wanted to cover that. You guys should see the look in Tom Cruise's eyes. Just the things that he says. I mean, it's like, I don't know what it is, the difference between a cult member and somebody who isn't indoctrinated. It's just this fervor, this drive in them that's unlike any other. But just to give you guys a little bit of background with it, actually, before I do move to guests. I do intend to move to guests in a second. From my understanding, I don't know how much you guys know about Scientology, but Tom Cruise, he was kind of tangentially involved in Scientology. He has been for a long, long time. And he ended up getting married to Nicole Kidman. And she wasn't a Scientologist. In fact, her father was a therapist. In fact, I think he was a psychologist. He could prescribe medicine and everything. And L. Ron Hubbard had a really big problem with psychologists in general, with psychology. He's labeled them SPs, aka suppressive persons. That's what it means. That's what SP means. And it's similar to disfellowshipped people with Jehovah's Witnesses, where they don't want their people talking to them or interacting with them in any way. Except Nicole Kidman's dad, he was not related to Scientology in any way at any point in time. He was just a psychologist. That's it. As somebody told me, Panda E actually mentioned from the Discord that they have the fair game policy. And the fair game policy is the one thing that I think makes Scientology worse than Jehovah's Witnesses. They're both cults. They're both harmful. I think Scientology is worse, just from what I know of how it works. The fair game policy is the idea that you can do or say anything in service of the organization. Now, Jehovah's Witnesses have something similar called theocratic warfare, but Jehovah's Witnesses are pacifists. They don't believe in hurting or fighting or anything like that. Scientologists have no issue with that. So what they'll do is they will gather information about somebody, and the moment they start questioning the group, a packet of information about this person will show up on a newsroom desk. Genuinely harmful. It's really bad. So anyways, Tom Cruise back in the early 90s, he was into Scientology, and then he kind of faded away from it a little bit, got married to Nicole Kidman, whose father was an SP. And then over time, the leader, David Miscavige, got his top guys to get Tom Cruise back into the religion. Basically at any cost. And that's what they did. I think it was Mike Rinder and a couple of others were working on it. Were trying to get Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman split up. And they succeeded. They got them divorced, basically. They drove a wedge between them. They put cameras in their house without their knowledge to spy on them and did all kinds of crooked stuff. It was insane. And they ended up getting them, they ended up driving a wedge between them, and they got divorced. And Tom Cruise just poured himself into this religion. They ended up trying to leverage his position as an actor to push the religion even further. And they pretty well succeeded at it, too. They gave him the, what was it called? The Freedom Award of Valor or something like that. And it's just this made-up thing. They made it up. Scientology did. And they gave it to him. And he's, of course, the only recipient. Nobody else has ever received it, or ever will, probably. And they just, they're blowing smoke up his ass, just making him out to be this great, this amazing guy who does so much for society. And in this video that I was going to play, I guess I'm not going to now, you can see the fire in his eyes, the craziness in his eyes almost. So I just got 2 emails from YouTube. One email said, let me just find it here. Well, I can't find it. I must have archived it. But it basically said I got a copyright strike. So YouTube has a content ID system, right? Where it's an artificial intelligence that scans videos for any copyright violations. And they can do one of 2 things. By default, the content ID system just it monetizes the video, takes the money it makes, and gives it to the owner of the copyright. That is what happened with the Heaven's Gate video a few weeks ago, whenever I did it. In this case, with Scientology, they actually gave me a strike, a copyright strike. And a copyright strike, you can only get 3 strikes, and then your YouTube channel is deleted. Hugo and Jake went through this whole thing. They had a big problem with it, where they kept getting copyright strikes, from people, and they would challenge it. And, you know, they got up to like 2 copyright strikes, one more and their channel is gone kind of thing. And then they finally started like a fundraiser to challenge it in court. Cost like $100,000, really expensive. Well, anyways, they ended up, the people who filed the claim dropped it because they knew it was in the wrong and all this other stuff. Well, anyways, so I get a copyright strike, not a content ID claim, but a straight up copyright strike. And then I get a second email from YouTube that says, "Hi, Telltale Podcast. Good news. David Miscavige," which, by the way, that's the owner of Scientology, or the leader of Scientology. "David Miscavige has just released their copyright claim on your YouTube video. This means your copyright strike has been resolved unless David Miscavige is still claiming other videos included in that strike." So they actually released the copyright strike, like immediately, basically. The emails were like 3 minutes apart from each other or something like that.
So it seems like they just wanted you to shut up.
Yep. They didn't want to go to court. They didn't want to even risk going to court with me, I imagine. They don't want to risk going to court with anybody because they know they're in the wrong. They just want to shut them up and be done with it. So I'm not going to shut up. That's what that means. That means I can't shut up. Who was the first guest? It was Struck by Lightning, right? Let's see. Are you there? Can you hear me? Testing?
Test. Can
Yay!
you hear me?
How's it going?
Oh, pretty good. How are you?
Not too bad. So I actually had you, or I've been talking to you over the past couple of days on the patron server, right?
Right, yeah. We've been talking a little bit.
So what religion were you originally? Are you still religious, or?
Yeah, I actually grew up in an offshoot of the Presbyterian Church. So there's 2 main branches. There's the PCUSA, which is more of your liberal, mainstream Christian group, for lack of a better word. And then there's the PCA, Presbyterian Church of America. That's where I grew up. That is where you get, the fundamentalism, you get the conservative, the evangelical. It gets pretty intense from time to time.
Right. Very interesting. So what was it like growing up that way? Like, tell me how you felt. Like, what kind of experiences did you have with it?
Oh, wow. I mean, how much time do we have?
Lay it on me.
Okay, so it was pretty intense growing up in it. The way that Presbyterianism works is that you have presbyteries that make their own rules, and then within the presbyteries you have churches that make their own rules as well. So it's not a monolithic group. It kind of depends church by church how things go. My church was very, very controlling, to the point where we weren't allowed to listen or watch anything that was secular, because one of the main principles of at least my brand of Presbyterianism was that there is no such thing as secular. So it was a lot of like K-Love, a lot of watching like Veggie Tales, things like that.
Really? No such thing as secularism?
Yeah. So
Interesting.
one of the things that makes Presbyterians, unique in their own denomination is they believe in predetermination. They also believe that all of God's creation is holy. And my church took it to an extreme, meaning that all creation should act as if they are holy, if they are able to. So if you listen to anything that was secular, you aren't acting holy, and therefore you're going against the church.
Really? Okay, interesting. So if you listen to anything that's secular, then you're basically breaking God's law, is kind of how they're playing it out, right?
Pretty much. I mean, we were controlled pretty well as far as the information that was told to us. I told you this on the Patreon server, but I actually got in trouble for listening to Avril Lavigne. And which was funny because that was nowhere near the worst of the things I had on my iPod. But the real indoctrination didn't really start until probably like 11, 12, and that's when they would send you to either to week-long and weekend-long seminars where you were separated from your family, your friends from the outside, things like that, and just got alternatingly love bombed and got the fear of God installed into you.
Right. Okay.
Well.
So is it fair? Do you feel like it was a cult? I mean, it sounds like it was. I mean, they seem to have hit a lot of the markers on the bite model.
Actually, one of my friends is an amateur cult enthusiast, and over New Year's, we actually went through the bite model,
Hmm.
and we were talking about it. And um, funnily enough, the church I grew up in hit most of the markers that were on the bite model,
Hmm.
even some of the ones I actually didn't realize even applied. Which, like the identity one, I
Right.
didn't think that they necessarily took my identity, but that my friend pointed out that's because I didn't have an identity to begin with.
Right. Okay. So how so? Like how was it that they kind of prevented you from taking on an identity of your own, do you think?
Well, a lot of it had to do with the fact that we weren't allowed to explore who we were.
Hmm.
Um, ba Basically, obviously we weren't allowed to explore anything secular. We also didn't get to have our own personalities.
Right.
We existed to spread God. We were a very evangelical church. And in that, I didn't really develop any social skills outside of being able to try to convert people to Jesus.
Right.
So my
Right.
identity was being evangelical. We had nothing else besides that. It was basically just like a mask.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I actually can relate really heavily with what you're saying there because Jehovah's Witnesses did a lot of similar things. Of course, with Jehovah's Witnesses, they use terms like brother this or sister that. And that is one way in which they break down your identity, too. You're supposed to be using, these cult names for each other. Even though one might consider calling somebody Brother Jenkins or whatever pretty common among certain religions, it's still part of breaking down that identity. It's a part of it. Did your group do that or?
Oh, we got to keep our names, but
Hmm.
that was about all we were able to keep.
Right.
We weren't even able to wear the clothes we wanted to wear.
Mm.
Growing up, we had to go to church. We had your stereotypical like Sunday best, where you had to wear these ridiculously stuffy dresses
Yeah.
if you're a girl, or like these mini suits. They relaxed a little bit as we grew up, where we were able to wear jeans, and by the time they did that, I was already questioning the religion. So to piss them off, I decided to wear like my ripped jeans.
Mm.
It didn't go too well.
I bet it didn't. How did they react? Poorly?
Poorly. But at this point, I was about 15 and I was already on my way out. My For those of you who haven't been on the Patreon server, my final act of rebellion was to actually go out and get a tattoo and piercings, which was completely sacrilegious because your body is a temple.
Pretty big deal.
And talking to by the elders and actually escorted out.
You were escorted out. That is insane.
Very, very quietly, of course, but yeah, one of the elders, like, while the sermon was going on, one of the elders talked to me out in the main hall, and he was telling me, "Well, how are you going to show people your tattoo? You're going to have to take your shirt off, right?" And
Okay.
me, being the sassy 15-year-old, was like, "Okay, what's the problem with that?"
Right. That sounds crazy. So, what happened after that? They escorted you out, and did you kind of? I mean, you were already on your way out of the religion at that point, anyways, right?
Right. Yeah, I really started questioning by when I was about 14. I was totally out when by the time I was about 16. At that point, basically kicked out of my house and moved in with my boyfriend at the time
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't really have anywhere else to go.
Yeah, that happens. So, I assume you hadn't finished high school at that point, right?
Right. I actually lucked out with my high school. I met a lot of friends who knew my situation and were able to help me out. One of my
Mm.
best friends actually more or less adopted me in. So if I couldn't find a place to stay, I could stay at her place. Even though I was technically living with my boyfriend, you know how
Yeah.
high school relationships go.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was also working full time as a telemarketer to pay rent. And so half the time I was like passing out in classes because I'd work till like midnight or 1 a.m. and then be heading to classes at like 8 a.m.
Yep. I actually understand where you're coming from with that because I also had to work at Burger King when I was in high school, but I wasn't even going to school by the time I got kicked out of my house. I just stopped going to school and just continued working because I couldn't do both, I felt. Although you seem to have managed it, I don't know how. It's really genuinely hard, and so I ended up dropping out. Is that what happened to you? Did you end up dropping out, or did you finish?
At one point, like I had almost a mental breakdown and thought about just doing the GED, but I did a lot of research into it and I realized I would fare better if I just stuck it out and finished my high school education. I actually ended up graduating a semester early, which made things a little bit
Very nice.
easier.
Yeah.
But it was definitely tough. Like I said, I was falling asleep in classes, and if it wasn't for having some really great teachers, I don't know how I would have made it through.
Yeah.
I probably would have had the same route that you did and just dropped out.
Yeah. I remember I was living in a trailer with a roommate, and I just kind of stopped going. And eventually, after like 3 or 4 months of not going to school, they told me they told me that they were going to send my parents to jail if I didn't drop out or continue coming to school. That's basically what they said. And they basically said, drop out now before you can't legally drop out anymore. It was like really bizarre. Just the way, I don't know why it happened that way. It was just really weird, but I ended up dropping out. But yeah, so you ended up going to college after that, right?
Right, yeah. I originally started in nursing and I got my 2-year nursing degree.
Okay.
I worked at a local hospital for a while and realized it wasn't for me. So
Mm,
I decided to be really masochistic and go back to school.
mm.
And I'm going for computer science right now with a minor in math and Spanish. And I'm hopefully going to go to law school to specialize in intellectual property at some point.
That's pretty
But
cool. Okay.
it wasn't easy to go through all of that. At one point, I was actually living out of a hotel while going to
Yeah.
school. Just because when you're young and where I'm at, you don't actually legally become an adult until you're 19, so you can't actually sign
Yeah.
contracts. It definitely made things a lot harder on me than it probably should have been.
Yeah. I know there are some other things that you can't do until you're 25, even like rent a car, for example. It's really not easy, and people don't really understand necessarily just how hard it is to be a 16, 17-year-old kicked out of your house. It's impossible almost. And
It really is.
yeah, I don't know how I managed it at 18. It's scary, and I just don't know how people do it, but I am glad that you made it out. I mean, I'm so glad to hear that you now how old are you now?
Before.
24. You've made it this far, and I mean, I know that I've lived poor. I don't know about you, but I've lived dirt poor before. I haven't had a penny to my name before. And
I mean, I was a 16-year-old trying to pay rent. Believe me, I know poor.
yeah, it's not fun. It's wrong that religions do this and somehow get away with it under religious protections and freedoms. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
I mean, I can definitely agree with that. And one thing that I've never been able to understand is how some families can basically kick their kids out into the cold.
Yeah.
Like I was lucky I still had some connection with my mom. I wasn't like fully excommunicated or anything like that. So she did help me out from time to time and I had a lot of good um I lived like a lot of the local churches gave out food, things like
Yeah.
that. But for I like from what you were saying, I don't know how you were able to do it because I barely scraped by the skin of my teeth. I don't know
Yeah.
how you're able to do it with not having like any family support.
Got to do what you got to do. And honestly, I did. I didn't have my family, but I did have Crate, who's on the podcast with me. She's been helping me. I had her, and I had her family. They helped me out a lot. So there is that. But a lot of people don't have family at all, and it's just insane, you know? Something's got to be done. Something has to be done about this. So let me ask you this. Where are you now? Are you an atheist, or are you religious, or where do you stand with it now?
Oh, completely atheist. And I know I may get a lot of hate for this, but I am very against any form of conventional religion at this point because I see too many parallels between even just like your conventional Methodist and the church I grew up in. A lot of
Yeah.
the churches I see are like two steps away from being where I was at.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page, honestly. I think that conventional religion is okay, I guess, but the moment it gets harmful is the moment I part ways. I don't accept it. I mean, you can believe what you want to believe. I don't think that it's rational or any of that stuff, but the moment it starts actually harming people, then it becomes an issue with me. And honestly, I feel like on a low level, religion is harmful in a way, just, all the time. Like, in some ways, just the idea of accepting a belief without question is kind of harmful inherently, right?
well, I definitely agree with that. At this point, I studied a bunch. I've studied a lot of different sciences, and I've been through college a couple times now. It's hard for me to be able to accept anything without a lot of proof behind it. I think that asking people to give up their critical thinking skills in order to accept things that were written down 4,000, 2,000 years ago
Yeah.
is inherently harmful just
Yeah.
because it, you're creating people who are dependent on church, what have you, for
Yeah.
knowledge as opposed to being able to teach them how to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, I definitely can agree with that. It's been an interesting talk. I appreciate you coming on, and I'm going to move on, but I will talk to you on the Patreon server, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I know that the term anti-theist has kind of gone through something of a rebranding lately, where originally anti-theism was a positive claim that God doesn't exist. And I think that a lot of activists and people in my community are trying to rebrand it as rejecting, or okay, so anti-theism as they are presenting it, or in their view, is believing that religion is harmful inherently to society, and that it should be basically done away with. I'm friends with all of these people. I'm friends with Shannon Q. I'm friends with Genetically Modified Skeptic and Apologia and all of them. And I know them, and I can tell you that they do not believe in violence, any of them. And I, of course, don't believe in violence either. So they're not saying in a violent, but through violent means. They're saying they just think that we should be working toward the goal of eradicating harmful religion. And like I said, I can agree with that. I agree with that goal. I think that that's a laudable goal, and I support them in it. But I'm not ready personally to take on the name of anti-theist yet. I will stick to atheist for this moment and support their goals. So we'll just go with that. There were two more people I wanted to get to, right? Who were the other? Yeah, Uncle Iro. Let me see. Are you there? Can you hear me, Uncle Iro?
Yes.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm fine.
It's good to hear.
I'm a bit tired.
Oh, you're tired? I imagine, yeah. What time is it for you? You're in Europe, aren't you?
It's 2:44 a.m.
That is so early. I'm sorry I couldn't do it earlier. So tell me.
No,
I'm sorry, that's so
okay.
late.
I actually went to sleep and then woke up.
Oh,
so
perfect.
I
That works.
and set my alarm clock so it will wake me up in time for the podcast. But I slept over it, so I slept a little too long, so I missed much of it. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. We had an interesting little fiasco. It's taken care of now. So, tell me, what religion were you originally? Are you still religious, or?
No, Catholicism. I
Okay,
guess.
interesting.
So Norway has, always been kind of secular in the sense that they don't take religion too seriously. I mean, when I grew up, I had this subject in school called it was KRL, which was Christianity, religion,
Christianity, religion, and it was KRL. You said
and no, sorry, KRS, which is the
KRS.
society lore or teachings.
Got you. Interesting. Okay.
It's basically it was basically a combination of religion and social studies.
Okay, very interesting. So, what kind of stuff did they teach in that exactly? And this was in a public school, or was this at your church?
They taught what you expect to be taught in a social studies class, but they also focused heavily on Christianity,
Okay.
and they didn't say necessarily, outright that this is true, but they focused on Christianity way more than any other religion. They were kind of just mentioned in passing. And then Christianity was the thing we focused on when religion was topic.
Right. Very interesting. Okay, so this was at church, right?
No. This was at school.
No way. It was really?
Yes, way.
Oh my God.
They changed it later on after I stopped going to primary school. By the time I started high school, it had been changed to
That is
more
insane.
focus on social studies.
That's insane. That's crazy. I mean, it seems crazy to me, surprisingly, because I'm in America, and America has this whole thing about separation of church and state, and I'm lucky that it
we had
does.
a state church for a long time. We became a 100% secular country in 2016, I think.
That's
Or
not
15.
bad. Okay. Well, that's good to hear.
We did achieve a full separation between the state and church. So that's
Right.
good.
I think that I know I'm going to get these numbers wrong, but from what I remember, "In God We Trust" was added to money in like the 50s or something, and it was also "One Nation Under God," part of our Pledge of Allegiance, was added to the pledge in the 50s. It was this big scare, and they removed Bibles from classrooms around the same time and everything.
I don't think we ever had a Bible in class. I think it was more like I remember a teacher having one on their desk and said, if you want to look at it, you can borrow it after class.
Well, that's a little
or
bit different, I
after-
guess, right?
So
Oh, that's interesting. So
but-
you said you were Catholic, right? Is what it was?
yeah, at least we went to a Catholic church. My mom was more religious than I was. She was never very militant, and my dad just said he didn't have an opinion.
Right.
Not too surprising, really, because my grandma was a very pious woman. Like a very sweet woman, but she was very, very religious. And I remember buying groceries for her, and I was supposed to buy strawberry yogurt, and I bought the wrong brand, and she was like, "Oh my God, oh no!" Oh
Right?
my God. Yeah.
Oh man.
I think my dad, she was like 88 then, but anyway.
Right. That's really interesting.
She was still very, very pious, and my dad got kind of fed up when he grew up.
Right. So how do you feel about like the Catholic Church specifically now? Are you
Well, when I was a kid, I had no, I didn't know about the child abuse thing and so on.
right, of course.
So I was kind of shocked when I learned about that in my early teens. But to me, I think I had the most anticlimactic view in church ever, because to me, church was the house of God. No. To me, a church was this big, old, gray, almost depressing stone building where I had to sit on a bench,
Right.
and that wasn't very comfortable, and listen to a guy talk about stuff I didn't understand.
It was like boring almost.
Yeah, it was boring, and it wasn't only boring; it was insulting, because he would these droning speeches, or whatever you want to call it, the sermons.
Yeah.
It was sometimes broken off by songs that sound like they were written by someone who was tone deaf or hated children.
Yeah. I know what you mean. Jehovah's Witnesses never had like a youth program or anything like that, so all of the kids had to sit in there with everybody else, and it was just boring as sin. And the songs were actually the songs when I was growing up, they weren't too terrible. I understand they're pretty bad now, but not too bad growing up. So I assume your church didn't have like a youth program or anything either.
No, there's this other church which is connected to the Scout group,
Yeah.
which is like a Methodist church. I was like a Scout leader there for a while.
Right.
Before I started in a theater group, and they had this program where they had made a homemade religious song for kids with dancing and so on.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I don't know a lot about the inner workings of Catholicism. Like, I'd really like to go to a Catholic church, a Catholic mass one of these days, and just kind of get the experience, you know?
Yeah.
I think it'd be pretty interesting.
I don't know how Catholicism is practiced in other countries,
Yeah.
but my experience, as I can remember at least, was mostly that we kind of sat there. We had this, they had a priest speaking. We had like I don't know what you call it in English. This thing where you sat on your knees before the priest and he blessed you.
I think I know what you're talking about, but I don't know the word for it either. I bet somebody will say it in the in Discord. But go on, you were saying?
Yeah, and then we sang some hymns, and then it was over basically.
Right, interesting. Yeah, I understand that there's a lot of variation in Catholic masses and Catholic churches in general. But a lot of the time, I think most Catholic churches do some similar things like communion and confession, and they'll pray the rosary and, you know, things like that, right?
Yeah. So I've only been to two Catholic churches. The one was the one where I grew up, and the other was when I used to go to church with my grandma.
Mm.
And it was pretty similar, different churches, different people, but
Yeah.
Mostly the same stuff.
Right.
The only difference was that the priest on the second church where my grandma went
Yeah.
was younger and way more laid back. Once he ended a sermon early to turn on the football game on the big screen.
Right.
And yeah, my grandma never quite forgave him for that.
Oh, that's funny, man. You know
Yeah,
what?
she left fuming.
There's like a part of it is interacting with people and being close to them and hanging out. You know, I mean, you can't always be stuffy, right?
Yeah,
It seems to me. But
so by and large, it has been very undramatic.
Yeah.
I had two polar opposite situations happening to me though.
right.
In the sense that, how do I put this? When I was in sixth grade, I had a friend over who started asking if we were Christians and stuff, and he was supposed to spend the night.
Right.
And we were sitting on the dinner table, and he started asking if we were Christians, and my mom said yes. My sister and I said yes. My dad honestly said, I don't care, I don't have an opinion.
Right.
And after that, Magnus kind of, you could see that something was troubling him and stuff. And I woke up in the middle of the night because he had the mattress on the floor next to my bed. And I heard him make these weird noises. So I tried to talk to him, but he wouldn't respond. He was just kind of lying there staring. And I figured, oh my God, something is wrong. So I got my dad. And my dad picked him up and carried him downstairs. And he had told me to stay in bed and told me that Magnus was just sick. He was going to get to be fine. The morning after, Magnus wasn't there, and my dad told me that he was picked up by his parents tonight because he was sick.
Really?
And
Okay.
but yeah, and on Monday when school started, Magnus just told me he couldn't talk, he couldn't play with me anymore. And I I found out a few years later when my dad figured I was old enough
Yeah.
that Magnus had a panic attack because he was afraid of my dad going to hell while we went to heaven.
Really?
Yeah, and when my and when the and when so he was in a state of shock or something when my dad took him down, and the only way they can manage to calm him down was by my dad fetching the Bible from a shelf, my mom's Bible, and finding some random passage about God loving everybody.
Right. That
Yeah, and they called his parents, and they went up to pick him up, and my dad was really pissed off and threatened to call child services on them.
man, that is insane. Some people
Yeah,
are
yeah.
so obsessed with that, you know?
My dad asked them like get their priorities straight. The kid first, religion after.
Yeah.
What the hell we taught this kid, and that's why the parents said he couldn't be friends with me anymore because they resented my dad.
See, that's a big problem that I have with religion is the fact that it drives wedges between people that don't need to be there, you know?
Absolutely.
It's a shame.
On the other end of the scale, where I think isn't that dramatic or serious is
Yeah.
okay. So many people might have heard this story before because it's come up in the voice chat and stuff. A few years ago, my grandma, who I mentioned, is now dead.
Mm.
She turned 94, so I don't think I told you this when I talked earlier. I once managed to get a priest to swear in church.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I walked past the church that my grandma used to go to, or that I used to go to with her.
Right.
And I just went inside. I sat down at this spot she had how do I say this? So she had trouble hearing and had poor eyesight. So Elar, the same church with the football. For the football game.
Right.
Sorry, I'm mumbling.
Oh, no, you're fine. So you were saying it was the same church as the whole football game thing where the guy turned on the football game.
Yeah, but this was a different priest.
Right.
It was,
it was a different priest.
One.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, I just went inside. I sat down at this spot that was held off for my grandma way at the front because she had poor eyesight and was old,
Right.
and so on. And I just kind of sat there for like 10 minutes, just reminiscing about my grandma, and then I stood to leave. And then the priest showed up, and it was like, "Oh, hello, Simon. How are you?" And we just, kind of exchanged pleasantries for a little bit.
Right.
And then he asked, "Oh, I haven't seen you in a while. So, do you go to a different church now?" And I said, "No. I'm an atheist. I just went for my grandma's sake." And, and then he became kind of defensive and stuff, and eventually asked me, "Just tell me, why don't you pray just in case you're wrong?"
Okay. Yeah. Pascal's
My
wager.
my immediate response was, and I quote, "For the same reason that I don't hang garlic above my door in case there's vampires."
Right? Exactly. That's a good response.
Yeah, and his immediate response to this was how do I put this? The Norwegian equivalent of, "What the hell? How can you be so disrespectful?" No, sorry. What the fuck? How can you be so disrespectful?
Right?
Get the hell out.
Oh, man. That is awesome, though.
Yeah,
I mean, that was a good
Yeah,
response. That's a
I
good
don't-
point, right?
Yeah, but I mean, religion is very important to people, so I
Yeah.
don't know if I am supposed to feel bad about it because I offended him. But at the same time, when I tell people about this, sometimes they even give me ovation and say, "Oh, well done. That's quite an accomplishment." I'm like,
Right.
"Thanks."
Well, here's the thing about it. Actually, I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna actually talk on that subject for a second before I take the next guest. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. It was
Thanks for having
interesting.
me.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on. It's been
Um,
pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry if I've been ranting and stuff.
No, you're fine. Yeah, that's a really good point. So here's the question. Where is the line with offending people? How do you tell something to somebody without offending them? Like he was saying the preacher asked him, why don't you just pray just in case? And his response was, for the same reason I don't hang garlic above my door in case there are vampires, because I just don't believe it. And I don't think that could have been a more perfect analogy. That's a good point. They almost certainly don't accept the vampires are real, in the same way that you don't accept that God is real. But they take offense to it. My thing behind this is their offense is taken, not given, okay? So you need to be a little bit less sensitive about things, first of all. The onus is on you to not get offended at things that people say. On the other hand, there is such a thing as just being disrespectful for no reason. I don't think that was disrespectful. He asked a question. He opened the door. He said to you, why don't you just pray just in case? Now, he was inviting an answer from that moment on. From the time that came out of his mouth, he wanted to know what your answer was. If he doesn't like that answer, then that's his problem, honestly. But if you walk into a church and start saying things to them that are rude for no reason, without being prompted or anything, that's just being disrespectful, and that's not helpful. If you're having a conversation with somebody about religion, I will tell you this. Statistically, you are more likely to bring somebody to your side of a conversation if you're respectful and kind and nice to them than if you mock them. Mocking people is not helpful. Is not progressive, doesn't get anything done except locking them into their position. Uncle Iro actually just said to me, people are to be respected, but you don't have to respect their opinions. That's true. You don't have to respect their opinions. But you should at least show the people respect. I don't know. There's a problem right now in the community with disrespectfulness. I'm not going to sit here and demand that you be respectful to everybody, but I'm going to tell you that you are actively harming progress. You are hindering progress every time you mock somebody or you're rude to somebody about their beliefs. You just cause the backfire effect. They're not willing to move over anymore. They're not willing to change their mind or position anymore because they felt disrespected. So if we can get our point across without being disrespectful, then we can statistically get more people to understand, to be on the right side of things, whatever side that may be, in whatever conversation it is. All right, well, I'll tell you what, we'll just wrap it up. Did you have something you wanted to mention, Crate?
Yeah, you said to be respectful and insult as little as possible. I was going to say to incorporate vampires into your response as frequently as possible. Right.
I don't think that there is anything wrong with that response, honestly. I mean,
I think it was great.
Yeah, I think it was fine. He invited a response in that very specific case. I think it was fine. But being disrespectful, like legitimately disrespectful, that doesn't help. That only hurts. So try not to do that if you find yourself in conversations with religious people. Anyway, yeah, I appreciate you guys coming on, and I will talk to you next time.